Well, I mean, the way we work out our issues, of course, is always by a discussion based on fact. I mean, that's the only thing we can do. And sometimes interpretations are different. People have different opinions. I mean, and when you start talking about Chicam or Medu Neter, there are many different ways of interpreting some things. People sometimes do not know the language, or some people who know the language believe that other people have it incorrect.
So is it one way, or
Yeah.
could timid mean several ways, several things in several contexts? Is it the context?
Well, I think it can mean several things in several contexts, okay? And I think that we should not necessarily take any of these issues personally. I mean, I always tell my students that they can criticize me. And in fact, I study hard, I reflect on things, but it's important for us to be able to do it with good spirit. Let's always be Afrocentric, which means that we should always highlight the central place of Africa and African people in the narrative. Okay?
So it could mean black people, it could mean black land.
Yeah, I think so. I think those are all one.
But it's not.
Yeah,
it's
not one thing.
thing. Okay, thank you.
So, all right, Dr. Jeffries, I have you on speakerphone. The young people have responded about this debate of new ideas, and I did this interview with the car, and I just want to cover just a few things before I put the whole video up so that people can understand. The young people are basically saying that they have new ideas, and they have looked at Diop's work, Cheikh Anta Diop's work, and that they have some disagreements and some new ideas. And I am saying, and we had talked before, there is this process of dealing with new ideas. And I'm trying to give them some background that Dr. Clark was a member of the African Studies Association. In 1968, there was a conference, and Dr. Clark brought a group of scholars to the African Studies Association, and you presented. So the African Studies Association was the European institution that had all the experts on Africa. Am I correct?
Yes, and they had a number of blacks. That's what Malefi was explaining. You should have that on tape too. That is the opening conference included white scholars, but they had a few blacks. Most of them were continental Africans.
And these scholars were largely experts, PhDs, correct?
Yes, all of them.
Okay.
They weren't largely, they were all. You had to be a PhD or somebody with expertise to be in the organization. It wasn't a popular organization. It was an organization of scholars and researchers.
And Dr. John Henry Clark brought a group of scholars, black scholars, in to actually present at this organization in 1968, and you presented.
Yes, I presented my dissertation, which was on the Ivory Coast, subnational politics on the Ivory Coast.
Great. And then after that conference, there were some things about that conference you might want to talk about.
During the conference, we made demands. This is the 60s now. We made demands that black people should be participating more meaningfully and should be in the leadership. So you're talking about the struggles from the 60s. Now you're at the end of the 60s. And so the Black Power movement, which we are part of and which we established organizations, from 1959-60, there was an explosion of black activity at all levels. The scholars, the students, the community. In the South and in the North. The students started the sit-ins in 1960. 1959-60, I was with African scholars and Caribbean scholars in Europe. I had a Rotary International Fellowship to study in Europe. That's when I met Sheikh Anta Diop, mentor, who was not only establishing organizations, he was establishing institutions. He had a think tank center, a publishing house, a library, a meeting place. And this fellow was Diop, D-I-O-P, but not Sheikh Anta Diop. It was his mentor, Alioune Diop. And Alioune Diop and his wife had set up a whole process of us, the scholars and the researchers, coming together to put the African truth in place. And so that's when I moved from 1949, 50, when I was the NAACP youth, and I wanted to be Thurgood Marshall, and I wanted to use the law to fight for black rights. But 10 years later, after I got to college and did my research, et cetera, Lafayette College, the urban crisis and all of that, I still was heading toward the law, but the world was changing. There was an explosion in Africa in the 50s. You had 1954, the Dien Bien Phu, 1955, the Bandung Conference of Asian and African leaders, including Adam Clayton Powell, 1956, the Sudan independence, 1957, Ghana's independence, 1958, the independence of Guinea, 1959, the independence of Cuba, the Cuban Revolution. This is the activity going on. And so it's not people sitting down reading papers or research. There's that going on, but at the same time, they're putting together revolutionary struggles to throw off the colonial oppressors physically, and to throw them off psychologically, and to throw them off intellectually.
Okay. So
no matter, look at it. We're not talking about a little ditty shit here and a little ditty shit there. There's a movement in the world. And in fact, when I came back from Europe in 1960, I wrote an article, Closer Look at the World, where I said that the struggles that we have in America are limited. There's global struggles. There's technology. There's communism. There's nationalism. And so we're training people not to look at this, but we're training people to be a cog in the business community. And so, and I was going into law, so that would have been a cog in America's system. But at that point, 1960, when I met all of these great brothers and sisters, was a turning point in my life.
Okay, so I want to talk about, at this particular point, you became what they call an African warrior scholar, meaning that, and Dr. John Henry Clarke, that was his tradition. There was writings, but there was boots on the ground. And you and some of the others, like Dr. James Turner and others, actually did both. But you was pulling together these beginning of these national associations and then linking them to the community. Is that correct?
1959, 60, when I came back from Europe, I saw systems. In America, you learn institutions, organizations, individuals. In Europe, you saw systems. Why? Because they had World War II. And what did that do? That devastated everything. The buildings were gone. The institutions were gone. The universities were gone. The economics was gone. So they had to build a new world. And I was there when it was being built. And they were studying it. And I was studying it with them. And so in 1959, when I went to Europe, I saw the world in ways that I could never have imagined sitting in America or sitting in a classroom. We were actually in the world. We saw the new cities being built. Our professors, Professor Liebman and Professor Oles, these were architects of the European rebirth. And what they were talking about was that no nation should have the luxury of a 100-day steel strike. And the only nation that had that luxury was America, because it controlled the world's economy after World War II. And so they said we have to rebuild Europe. And the first thing is economic. And so we have to have a coal and steel community linking Germany and France, because Germany and France fought 2 wars or 3 wars over the Ruhr Valley steel-coal complex. They fought the Franco-Prussian War in the 1870s, and Bismarck won that. They fought World War I in the 1914 and 1915 and 16. They fought World War II. Over what? Who's going to control the economics of the coal and steel in the Ruhr Valley?
Okay.
So Europeans were saying was no nation, America, had a 100-day steel strike.
So you took these. So you took these ideas, and you and Dr. Clark and others, John Jackson and other scholars, took these into your thinking. And in your wider conversation, you start talking about the Pan-African conferences. So they're going to hear that, but
politics and culture became our reality. Economics is not separate; it's a foundation. Politics is not an individual thing; it is what is necessary to manage economics. And culture is not dancing and shaking your booty and writing books. Culture is the way people live, their values, and culture tells you what type of economics to have and what type of politics to have. So that the three dynamics involve internal development of the individual and the family, and external development of the communities and the nations and the world.
So you began with Dr. Clark and others, knowing that you needed the students and the community. You began, and other scholars, you began a cadre system of training, of finding those who can deal in the academia, finding those who can deal in the community, finding those who can deal within the in the places where they lived, and connect all of that up into a cohesive movement that stood on the work, the intellectual work of people like Cheikh Anta Diop and what Alioune Diop had created, and others. Is that correct?
Right, but so we were being trained for global leadership, and Alioune Diop was not just an intellectual. He was a complete person, institution, hooked up with the city. That's why when you heard me read the dedication of Cheikh Anta Diop to his mentor, it was about culture, African culture, not about Marxist-Leninism, not about nation building. It was about culture. Culture allows you to control your mind. Culture allows you to control your socialization and your how you fit into society. And so these brothers built institutions, organizations. They had a worldwide approach. They dealt with Marxism. They dealt with communism. They dealt with nationalism. And so you can't be isolated and studying some little glyphs and whatnot. Even if you do that, you got to be in the world.
I just want to give a backdrop of it. So y'all became what I call, and what you have taught me, African warrior scholars. And so
Right.
The concept of African warrior scholar is that even yourself, you could have been a kind of a armchair revolutionary and writer, Dr. John Henrik Clark.
An armchair scholar or an armchair community man. But the African approach is to try to be all of that. Scholar, warrior, African uncle, father in the community. We didn't just carve out a little niche. We carved out a grand role of expanding the African consciousness and the African ability to take on the world system and build its own system.
Okay, so and that is when I entered the Black Studies department in roughly '84, and that was the model. So you hooked up young thinkers, young students to find their place in this movement as a total process, not as a individual process. Is that correct?
And so it was at its core Pan-Africanism, liberation of the African mind. But by the time you had gotten into the picture, we had gone through 7980. And that's when Bruce Williams came up with the Nubian finds, etc. And so what did we do? We didn't say this is a white man. What did we say do? We contacted our Chicago Foundation, Jake Brothers and all of them, and they gave us the clue of what was happening. So one of the student leaders at City College, Michael Edwards, with this knowledge that Jeffrey Scobie, Small, and Katemi and Amoda, and when we brought in people like Akin Jobin from Nigeria, Kamara Lai from Guinea, Richard Nunu, who controlled the slave forts in Ghana, Bill Riviere, who was Scobie's young partner from the Dominican Republic. When we provided that period from 72 to 82, African ideas and African models, it was a revolutionary transformation. And Mike Edwards, one of the student leaders, went into the classroom with the books. He didn't go in with a bat. He went in with our weapons of mass destruction of the system of white supremacy, and he took over the class. And he wasn't haranguing them. He had the material, the books on the ledge. John Jackson, Stolen Legacy, and Cheikh Anta Diop, and Dr. Ben. And so he was teaching the class, and the teacher got nervous and scared. And so the teacher said, well, the class dismissed. And so he went out of class, and then he went and got security. He came back with the security, and Mike was teaching. He wasn't haranguing. This is the knowledge you need for leadership and development. And so he was there putting it out to the students. The security, who was a black man, said, Mr. Professor, this does not look like a disturbance. This looks like a class. And so he didn't run Mike out of the class. And Mike continued to teach.
So after this
as a result of that, the word got around that Jeffries is training the students to go into class and run the people out of the class with the knowledge. And so Marshak, the president, who was who helped to develop the atomic bomb and who had invited me to come to City College, Marshak called me in and asked me what happened. And I said that this young brother who has this knowledge and whatnot does not intend to listen to bullshit and lies and falsification. And he and others are going to challenge the intellectual traditions of the Western world. So Marshak said, okay, I understand that, but let's do it in a way that makes some sense. Let's have an international conference on the origin of civilization. And so we had a conference on early civilization. It was planned with Marshak and myself and others. And so that conference took place in December 1980. We had the Bruce Williams article. We brought Bruce Williams into the conference. In fact, I'm looking at Brother Small, myself, and Bruce Williams in a photo right in my bookcase. And in the back, next to him is Professor Irani, who was head of philosophy. We had a conference in which it was agreed that the college's regular intellectual processes would stop. And for 3 days, we would have a conference in the Great Hall, bringing all the classes of the social sciences, philosophy, history, economics, anthropology, psychology, Black studies, Puerto Rican studies. And they all came. The thousands of students came. And we had this conference. And we told them, you can bring any scholars you want. All we need is Cheikh Anta Diop. And they brought in 12 other scholars from around the world, Asians, scholars. They brought in Bruce Williams. They brought in a Mexican Jew from Jaime Litvak from Mexico. They brought in Hoffman of the University of Chicago. They brought in Fair Service of the American Museum of Natural History. And all these scholars participated in this. And we said, just give us Diop. But because of his political Marxism and struggles with Senghor and Senegal, he wouldn't let him come. We sent him a ticket. And so we already said it for the president to open up with Diop, for the vice president to open up with Dr. Clark, and then the next day would be some more of us. But when Diop couldn't come, the people said, well, what are we going to do? I said, you're not going to do a damn thing. We're going to go on with the conference. I said, Diop can't come, but his work is here, and Dr. Clark will move up in his place to be with the president. I will move up in Dr. Clark's place to be with the vice president. And on the third day, we'll have Dr. Ben or Van Sertima or Professor Scobie. And so one of the greatest moments in my life is a conference we organized out of struggle and brought in the intellectuals, and we beat them to death.
Okay.
Well, we're talking, as I mentioned, leadership training. I've been a part of that process since my life. When I was born in 1937, on my grandfather's birthday, my mother said, we got another generation we got to train. And so my brother and I were raised. I'm just looking at a paper I did on the Nile Valley in the 6th grade and reading it. Of course, I copied it out of a book, but I did it in my own living room, the Funkin Wagnall Encyclopedia. At the same time that I'm doing that in the 6th grade, I'm getting prepared for the 7th and 8th when I became the president of the grammar school. And I'm giving the speech on the Statue of Liberty, leading my class. So I'm training. The training started in the homes. It continued in the churches and in the communities. It continued on the playing field, on the baseball diamond, on the basketball court. Training for leadership, not accepting any limitations. Whiteness was not a problem for you. You were as good or better than white folks. It wasn't a question of coming up from the South or coming from the North. Black people coming from the North and South had this same thing, training your children and preparing them for leadership. They were going to be the mayors and the heads of institutions and the preachers and the teachers, as well as people managing economics. And so this is what we're talking about. Dr. Clark came up from the South the same way. Here's a man who came up with no formal education that we had. He got it from living it. He came up to New York at 17 from Georgia. He taught us, our family taught us to be in a leadership position and to think large and live large. Even my brother, who they wanted to put in a dump class, my mother went into the school and said, you keep him in the same classes, heading for college like his older brother. I trained him for the first 5 years, 6 years. I know what he can do. And if she had not done it, there would not have been a Jeff, a Hakeem, or Hassan.
And what about the Sons of Africa and the students at City College? Did you train them in that tradition?
Dr. Clark was a scholar who had been trained by elders. John Jackson was his elder. Huggins was his elder. And they had the Harlem History Club. And Krumah came from Pennsylvania, from Lincoln, to be a part of that. So they had this, and they had a whole thing of Marxism and whatnot, where you had studied and you got your training and you planned strategies, etc. So this mix of Pan-Africanism and Marxism and black nationalism was what prepared Dr. Clark. And so he and others worked it. And they didn't do it by themselves. They brought us along. They made us a part of the family. James Turner, Ron Walters, Len Jeffries. We were a part of the family. Shelby Lewis, Herschel Shauner, the women, Shashi McIntyre. And then all of us went into key positions in the society, no matter whether in an institutional organization. And our thing was to bring up the groups up under us. So it was normal and natural for us having come from Tiger Cubs of Dr. Clark. And then he introduced us to Dr. Ben. And he introduced us to Haile Selassie. And of course, to Sheikh Anta Diop, he took us to Europe in '72 at the Magnin Conference and introduced us to Basil Davidson, who was an outstanding white man on the left, who had been digging about the lost cities of Africa, the golden age of the Moors, and all this thing that black man burden. That Basil Davidson at the Magnin Conference, it was decided by Dr. Clark and Kamala Lai and others, I think Sheikh Anta Diop, that the next conference on African civilization will not be in Europe. The next conference should be on the African continent. So who went home with that idea? I've already been working with Alex Haley, so I know about the Manding, because that's where our roots is centered. I know about Kamala Lai, because he is one of the great scholars, wrote The Black Child, and these were people so I brought the roots phenomena of the slave port to City College. I brought Akin Jobin from the Yoruba civilization to City College. I brought Cameron to City College.
And John Jackson. And John Jackson.
John Jackson, we got the elders, so you got this enormous reach. And the idea was, and it really worked, because we called for an African civilization conference on the African continent.
Okay.
I put the brainstorm with us. In 73, we began the relationship with the University of Ife for the conference. In 76, we had the conference. And in 70, in Yoruba land. But in 79, it went from a African Yoruba civilization conference to a relationship with the scientific community in the United States with Frank Press out of the White House. And it went from just being a conference on Yoruba civilization and its significance to nation building in Nigeria. We had a Nigerian African-American United States major linkage with their university system in 1979 and into 80. You had the training in your home and in your community. So NAACP youth training was a part of our growing up, and that produced the Donald Paynes and the others that were a part of my young people. But the training also inspired people such as James H. Robinson, Dr. Robinson, who came up from Knoxville, Tennessee, from the bottom, and eventually went to Lincoln University and was studying with Nkrumah. And so his relationship with Nkrumah got him inspired, and his desire to be a minister got him inspired to create Operation Crossroads Africa. And he took young black men and black women and gave them opportunities to move through the world and meet the leaders of the world, these new African nations, and put projects in place that brought hundreds of youngsters from Canada, America, black and white, to work on projects throughout Africa. A young person like Dick Hope, whose grandfather was John Hope, the head of Atlanta. Herschel Challoner, who became a leader she became a leader of Spelman. She and Marion Wright, who actually brought Donald Stewart in as the president of Spelman. All of them come out of Crossroads. Marion Wright went on Crossroads. Herschel Challoner went on Crossroads. Don Stewart's wife went on Crossroads. This was a black man and other black adults training us to go throughout the world. Go to the Congo. You go to the Congo, 1964, Congo is another chaos. But he's not going to say, I'm sending you to other chaos. You can handle this. You've handled it. You handled it in 61 that the U.S. Embassy said, get rid of this old white man who is the leader of the group. Let Jeffries take over. That's my first experience in Africa. They're already saying, you are the leader. The people came from France and whatnot. I had been in France the year before. So I'm speaking French with these students. So I was the leader. But fortunately, they kept the white man there because he wanted to travel throughout Africa. And we traveled throughout 7 states, and I could not have handled that. But I learned to see how this cracker, this little German, Kreitner, could go through these nations, go through these African nations and take us almost up to Timbuktu, but it was rainy season. We couldn't do that, so we went to Upper Volta, down to Niger, then to Benin, and then on to Togo, and then on to Ghana.
Because
our education was not education for degrees. You got the degree, but it was education for leadership in the transformation of the African world. And so we did not hesitate to go anywhere in that African world and be comfortable with it. We didn't mind going into revolutionary struggles in the Congo. We went into revolutionary struggles in Angola, Mozambique, and setting up these programs and these activities. So these people who had faith in us, these black men and women who had faith in us, we saw what they did. So James Turner went and set up a monumental program in Cornell. And then he brought in others. He brought Walter Rodney. When Walter Rodney was kicked out of the university, he could pass through the black network. That meant he could come to Florida and he could speak and get a couple $1,000 honorarium. He could come to Atlanta and he could speak at the Institute of the Black World, which was run by Vincent Harding, who comes out of New York City, a City College graduate. But he also was a preacher man who was next to King. He provided the the Riverside speech that transformed King's life when he went against the Vietnam War of America. It was a black man friend of his, Professor Vincent Harding, who wrote the most famous speech that King made, the most devastating. Not he had a dream. We got to struggle and we got to deal with it. And this war is a fraud and it's taking all of our activities. So you had this interrelationship. And when he came to Atlanta, he went to the various schools. When he came to North Carolina, when he went to Howard, there was Ron Walters to take care of. When he came to New York City, there was Len Jeffries to take care of. And then he went through New York City after Hunter and the other schools, and he went on to Cornell University, and he went back with thousands of dollars so he could continue his great work. That in place, we put that in place for the students who we came in contact with. The masters who had taught us and had made us humble in the work, made us commitment and ready to give up our lives, ready to sacrifice our families, but telling us we needed partners. All of us were able to get a partner for life. James Turner still with Janice for 50 years. Asa Hilliard was with his wife for 54. Shashi McIntyre was with Ken and Ron Daniels and Ron Walters. I mean, so they taught us not only about leadership in the struggle, they taught us about having yourself together so you could handle this shit and it couldn't bring you down to your knees. And so we actually created a cadre. Brother Small, the same thing, because Sister Ella had worked with him and Malcolm, and when he combined with me and others, we had this thing of training the youth until we came up with the Sons of Africa, so we could systematically and in a calculative way put the transfer of knowledge and the spirit of Pan-Africanism in the young people. So we had, based in City College, the Sons of Africa; based in Hunter College, which is the female component, the Daughters of Africa. Well, we had been successful in our growings up and in our growth and development. We had assisted the elders like Dr. Clark and John Jackson and Chancellor William and the others. And so we had hoped that the young people who were in our network and a part of our socialization and our acculturation would have a consciousness, band together and support us. And so when the big struggle came over the intellectual warfare and the culmination of the cultural wars in the 70s and 80s, young people who were our children in the struggle, or our cadre in the struggle, or our potential replacements in the struggle, they got an unusual experience in the world of hands-on. Wherever we went, we took them. If we were going to a trip out south, we would take them. If we were going to West Africa, we would take the student. Eventually, the struggle got so heated that some of our intellectuals and elders came up with a strategy of trying to put the education of black folk and Latin folk and Asians in the curriculum. So in 1988, I was asked to be a part of the struggle over the curriculum. And we had 3 or 4 professors. I was the major consultant. Then we came up with a project called the Curriculum of Inclusion. The existing curriculum in the school systems of New York was clearly a curriculum of exclusion. It did not include Africa, did not include the African Americans, did not include Asia, Asian Americans, Latinos, or the Native Americans. And the students were as involved in this struggle as I was. We put together teams of people. One of our secretaries, Joanne Harper, she did a lot of the typing. The brothers did a lot of the research. And this enormous struggle was worldwide. It wasn't limited to New York. We were able to utilize the expertise of the Sons of Africa. Some of them had inspirations to be lawyers. Some of them had inspiration to be engineers. Some of them had inspiration to be professors in various elements of study. Some of them were growing faster than others, and they took leadership roles. And one of the fastest growing was Reginald Antoine Mabry, deep roots in Virginia, raised by a lovely Virginia mother. That relates to me. I was born by a lovely, strong Virginia mother, and I had a tall 6'5" father, and my mother helped him understand that the priority was these children. Brother Reggie had a tall, strong father, and I had a brother. Reggie had a brother and sister. And there were parallels between Reggie and I were fascinating. And they were wonderful. And he stepped in and allowed it to happen.
So you sent me to the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, not for a job, but to be engaged in this movement. And you sent me and you helped me finalize my degree at City College so I could have something to show for and to feed my family. And that you engaged me and the brother Pat and brother Rick and Charles and many others in this in the direct struggle.
We had two Michaels, Michael Todd and
Nimhard.
Right, Limhard, and we took them with us on the trips that we made. When we set up the curriculum of inclusion struggle, and we set up a year program at the Abyssinian Baptist Church. That was what we called the communiversity, putting the education in the community. And that meant that each week you would have a chance to buy one book on Africa and Black America and or the Caribbean. So each week you had 2 books. At the end of that, you had the 100 books. The students helped us manage and control that. And at the end of it, 120 of us went on a pilgrimage to Africa. And the students had a chance to have the experience of a communal cooperative collective experience that had been handled for a year in the Harlem community, and now it was transferred to the African community, and it opened up Africa to them.
So in '86, I went with you and Dr. John Henry Clark and Brother X and others to Ghana. In 1987, we went to ASCAC with ASCAC, took 1,000 people to the Nile Valley, and 91 91 in the beginning was the takeover of City College, trying to ensure the education for generations of black folks in that City College. And then after that, when you were in Africa in 91, the attacks came. The attacks on the curriculum of inclusion came. And so what I'm trying to get from you is
And I was singled out as the leader of this movement who needed to be brought down and whipped and strung up by his testicles in order to set an example. And they picked the right person because he was ready at that time to step up and take on the world. And we did it with the support of professors and others like Scobie and Small. We did it with support of the student leadership, like Brother Reggie and a whole host of others. And we also had the sisters who were important. Donna Marimba Ani, Donna Richards was training them. But these young men had to step up just like we had to step up when we took the trip. And at the same time, we were building organizations that now have international standing. And we went, Dr. Ben said, we need to have a African organization to deal with this explosion of knowledge. And so in '84, a conference was set up. One was in Los Angeles, and that was led by Alana Karanga and Jacob Carruthers. Another was in that same year in September, and that was Ben Sedema, Dr. King, Dr. Finch, and Dr. Higgin. And so out of that came what we called ASCAC, the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization. And that became the organization that we conceived of since we were into institutionalized building and heavy organization. and heavy lifting. We formed a structure. It was conceived of in 84. It was given its incorporation in Chicago in 85. It was given its economic foundation at City College in 86. And then in 87, when we had the big activity at City College, we said, let's go to the Nile Valley in 87. So Chicago organized, Los Angeles organized, New York organized, Baltimore organized, Florida organized, and we took almost 1,000 people, men, women, and children, grandsons. We took babies, but the students played an important role in the leadership function. And in fact, Brother Reggie played a phenomenal role because he was asked and he was told, we wanted you to step up to the plate. We had so many people applying from all across the country, men, women, and children and families, to go on this trip, that we went past our 400 limit. Then we went to 5, then we went to 6, then we went to 7. We had 7 international airlines to take people to Kemet. I was in charge of Royal Air Morocco, and I had 150 people, including Naim Akbar, Regent Adelaide Sanford, and Zinga, the president of our organization. And I was responsible for getting them through onto Morocco and then onto Egypt. Reggie was responsible for Air Jordan. 140 or more people he was responsible for. He had an international experience the year before in West Africa, when he and others were responsible for Dr. Clark's son, Sony, my nephew Hassan, Professor Small's son, Malik. And that was preparation for this enormous responsibility. It was an overload, but they didn't run from it. They stayed with it.
Last question, or last thing to respond to is that, so the young people have an idea that Kemet does not mean black, it means riparian. And it's an idea, and they have done some research, and I try to work with them to give them a process. I try to take it off the YouTube and the street corners, and I tried to have them engaged in ASCAC, and they went to ASCAC, and they were not happy with the statement that Dr. Mario Beatty said. Was basically, he did not agree with their methodology, and so the younger people are upset. So what I want to get from you is, what is the process? Is the process to come as an outsider, or is the process to work within the system, and to and do you as elders give the young people opportunities to look at their ideas, proof their work, right? Present their work, and then have to take whatever criticism, and the criticism is not to destroy them, but to make them better.
Well, criticism helps you grow. And so we learned that. A great mind, we call him the Imhotep of the modern age, Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, had his mentors, and they helped him grow. And the process that we put in place is discover the information, process the information, analyze the information, make comparison. Don't just take a particular item and then use it ideologically as this is the key. Analyze it, because you may find that this might be a door, but when you go through that door, there's all kinds of other doors that are available for you. So you have to be self-critical. You have to be critical of where you are. You have to be critical of the people you're working with. And that's the process that we put in place. The ideologies vary. It might be coming from a scientific approach or a psychological approach to the mind, or a literary approach, or it might be a Marxist-Leninist approach. But we as African people have a responsibility to come together, put our resources together, clash with each other, but not destroy each other. And with that clash, we can come to different levels of understanding and appreciation. So do not let an incident or a circumstance or an individual or an institution, organization, or formation create what I call a paralysis of analysis. that can stop you and stymie you, that can limit you. We need a systems analysis. So in order for a system to work, you need an interrelationship between, for example, economics, which is your creative, productive capability. And economics can't stand by itself. You have to have politics, and politics is that what politicians do is what communities do to manage their economics. And your economics and your politics can really have a systems understanding and impact when you put culture in the mix. Culture will tell you what type of economics to be involved with and who to do your politics with. So we want you to get the knowledge and move with it, expand it, but be critical and also be self-critical. And the weaponry that we are producing is to deal with the systems of white supremacy and systems of arrogance coming from what we call Arab or Asian. It's not to be used in an unthinking way or to destroy your brothers and sisters. You grow with your brothers and sisters.
So the young people they seem to be saying that one, they disagree, they're not accepted, right? And I want you to talk about the process of being accepted. Do they come within the organizations and struggle within the organizations, or do they simply just present their ideas? Do they simply use YouTube as a tool because they know that the elders are not using YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and all these new technical things that are part of their generation? What is your guidance on how this flow of information can happen? And that's pretty much the last statement. How is the process? We invited them into ASCAC to come and present. They have created a book. They have created a book that they have that they're selling. We have criticisms of the book, but is there a one way or a collective process? Is it them against us or them against you? I'm having you respond directly to the young people, basically saying that, well, since they're outsiders, they're going to do it their way. In light of all the institutional building and all the things that you have said, because they don't have the relationships, unfortunately, that I did have. What is the process, Dr. Jeffries? That's my last question.
Well, and that last question is the important one. If your mind is open to ideas, and if your thinking allows you to analyze these ideas, and if you can look at various struggles that have been waged by people's organizations, institutions, and movements, then you are prepared to move together with others. If you lack the inability to look at things over a period of time, to analyze them and see them from various levels, and you are ideologically caught in a situation where you think you have the information, all of us know that what you think you may have in one period of time can be flipped over with other information in another period of time, so you have to be flexible. If people do not want you in their organization, if you make an honest attempt to work with them, then you have a right to set up your own. If you want to use the technology that is available, I knew how important that technology was. So when we had a manhood ceremony for my oldest nephew when he was 12 or 13, I gave my brother $1,000 to get him computers. That was a key, because both of these youngsters have used the computer technology to do the things that they have done, including the youngest one who produced the struggle in Lowndes County, Bloody Lowndes, a brilliant book he did analyzing all those various struggles that went on with the communities, et cetera, et cetera. He's now a professor at Ohio State. The other professor went on to be a professor, a teacher, and a lawyer, graduating at the top of NYU Law School. So that the use of the technology is important, but also there's a danger that people can use the technology to prostitute the information and not deal with the critique that you have to review things, bounce it off of others, have a seminar workshop, or have an organization like we had these. We wanted to pass the knowledge down to the community. So First World Alliance set a model of putting the information in the communities, having people come in and present it to the community and then having workshops and sessions and other activities around it. So we have to see ourselves as a complex family that's moving through the world with power and dignity, facing these systems of our destruction. And we're the only ones that can deal with them in a real way. But if we have internal confusion, and our brother Dr. Wade Noble said it best, African people everywhere suffer greatly from a shattered consciousness and a fractured identity. And it's too often we get a bit of an ideological approach, and then we go at it not against the enemy, but against our own brothers and sisters. Or we may have an enlightenment, as Dr. Asa Heaton and others found when they went to Liberia in the 60s, and Len Jeffries and Rosalind Jeffries, when they traveled around the world, meeting at Haile Selassie and living in Africa and doing their research and whatnot. Then we realized that you may have a foundation in terms of what you think is your particular truth, but there's another level. I had not had looked at the Ivory Coast in terms of its economic political development, and we saw the economic miracle that was created, but I had no idea at the same time that I was looking at an ideological perspective that went all the way back to the Nile Valley in reference to the city of God and the consciousness of Akhenaten, who comes out of the Rosicrucian movement, comes out of him, and building a new city of God, moving from the greatest city of the ancient world, Waset, and then going into the jungle and creating a new. These are the things we have to begin to understand. Let's not stay fixed in one position. Let's continue to grow. Let's not see our brothers and sisters, no matter how much we differ with them, as the enemy. They are our family. And then let's learn to work with others, but not in such a way that we feel that we can be bought or sold our future to other people.
Okay, so you have some work right now. First of all, I want to let everybody know that there is a GoFundMe.com/Leonard Jeffries where people can donate to your work. The other thing is that you are now engaged in moving some of your personal papers to an institution.
The historical black colleges, and so we're working that. It may take months to do it. We also are working on expanding our base in Ghana, which we have a hotel, which we want to turn into more than a hotel. We want to turn it into a research center, as well as the hotel, a place where people can grow, organizations can and come together. We also have a connection with the Nile Valley with our brother Tony Browder, who has this phenomenal, unique dig in the Nile Valley. And of course, we have our connections deep into Nubia. Brother Taki, one of our brothers, he took me, for example, on one of the most fantastic trips of my life, and that was all the way into the Sudan, into the pyramids, the 388 pyramids that are in Nubia, south of Egypt. And so, of course, we will be working in a big way with Ethiopia, because Ethiopia has a special role, and then Addis Ababa is the center of African continental politics, which is the African Union, and so that organization needs to grow. And so we have a choice of making our contributions internally to ourselves and our communities, externally to other communities, linking up a whole other world of South America, which we have to, and that's Brazil. And so we've had a special relationship with the Brazilian African.
So lastly, if there are talented people that have library experience, archivist experience, experience in universities as far as dealing with personal papers and stuff like that, can they call you?
Certainly. When I get on an international or national program, I never hesitate to put out my number. My landline is 201-837-1355, but there are 500 messages on it, 300 of which I want to save, 200 of which I want to get rid of. But the best way to contact by telephone would be the cell phone, which is 201-668-7973. Let me say that again, 201-668-7973. And of course, you have been working diligently helping me with the Facebook and other contact points. So if you feel that should be laid out, you can do that. I appreciate all the work that you've done, and the others, all the work that they've done. We couldn't have done it without these younger generations coming up under us.
Okay, so with that, Dr. J, I am going to close, let you get back to your split pea soup, which is probably warm or cold. I am so sorry about that. I just wanted a statement that I can put on social media about this process.
Because there's some important things we had to do. And the brother who has a base in Philadelphia, he's setting up an internet connection so that we can put information and ideas out for discussion and whatnot. And so he has a media process working. So people will be hearing about it.
Okay, wonderful. So, Dr. J, I hope this recording comes out. Yeah. So I want to close here.